All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Book Cafe podcast. In today's episode, we will be talking about this book right here entitled Mastering Your Life by Malti Bhojwani. And I'm extremely privileged and thrilled to have the author herself in today's episode to talk about the book. So, let's just dive right in. Hi, Malti. Welcome to Book Cafe podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Omar, for having me. What a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Malti, we will, of course, get to talk about the book in just a minute. But for our viewers and listeners who haven't read the book yet and who might be discovering you for the very first time, do please take a moment to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your cultural background, where you grew up, what you do for a living, in fact, anything at all that you'd like to share with us.
Okay. Well, let me start chronologically. So I was born here in Singapore. So I'm actually dialing in from Singapore.
Mhm.
I was born here, which many people find surprising. Of course, I have Indian parents, as you can tell from my look and my name. My father was born in Sindh, which is now part of Pakistan. My mom was born in China. And they met here in Singapore. They had a beautiful love story back in the 60s. So I'm a first generation Singapore born Indian. And then somehow my father used to move us around a lot. We moved many homes within Singapore at first. And then he got bored of moving home. So we started moving countries.
Mhm.
And so in that regard, we moved to Spain. We lived in Madrid for a while. And then we moved to Australia in Sydney. And then I lived in Jakarta. And then I went back to Sydney. Then I tried living in India. So I lived in Mumbai for about 3 years and in Pune for 2. And I came back to Singapore about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been back since. So that's the kind of the geographical journey. And then beyond that, I have one daughter. She's all grown up. She's in her 30s, early 30s. She lives in Sydney. I'm off next week to see her and spend some time with my daughter. So I have one daughter. She has a gorgeous dog whose name is Loki. And I am remarried. So if you read any of my books, I was married when I was very young. And so my daughter comes from my first marriage. And I've recently remarried about 4 years ago um, to a lovely man who lives here in Singapore with me.
Okay, well, wonderful. So thank you so much for summing that up. Yeah, it's been quite the itinerant life for you, I can tell. And obviously, I have read your book, and so that is the reason why we are having this discussion. But yeah, but for any of our viewers and listeners who haven't, I think that sums it up really well. So, Malti, the book is entitled "Mastering Your Life," but and this obviously isn't your first rodeo because the first book of yours that I actually did read was entitled The Mind Spa, which is right here next to me. And before that, your first ever book that you wrote was Don't Think of a Blue Ball. And as far as I remember, that book came out in 2012, and Mastering Your Life came out in 2022. So the first question I'd like to ask is, why another book? What was the reason for writing this particular book, and how does it differ from the books that you've already written previously?
Thank you, Omar. It feels like a lifetime ago. I was living in Mumbai when Don't Think of a Blue Ball, the first gratitude journal, and the Mind Spa were published.
Mhm.
So that was when I was in India. So India was very good to me in that way, because that's when I found publishers who wanted to publish my work. Maybe the best way to answer this is, so I was in my late 30s, early 40s when those books were released.
Mhm.
And when Mastering Your Life came out, I had just turned 50. I had just lost my father. And my mom also had a massive heart attack just 14 months after my dad died. So I don't know, I think it's a stage in one's life where, crossing 50, I think, is a milestone. It can be very, very liberating and empowering, but it's also very scary because you're going through so many things, physiologically, emotionally, mentally. And it's often coincides with that phase in life when your parents are no longer, taken for granted.
Yeah.
So mastering your life also, I guess I didn't say much about my work. So I have been life coaching. It was called life coaching when I started. Now I don't call it life coaching anymore. Now I'm known as a facilitator of transformation because we facilitate transformation through different ways. So some of the ways I do it now is with organizations, with teams. So leadership teams will come together in a room for 2 or 3 days with me, and I support them in being able to challenge their own mindset so that they can change the way they see the world, they see themselves, they raise self-awareness, and then that opens up new possibility to a new way of being. And so that's kind of been my work. So for 20 years now, I've been coaching and facilitating transformation. When I wrote the first books, I was maybe 10 years in my career as a coach, and I had certain ideas and certain knowledge maybe, and I wanted to share it with the world. And that's how I wrote the first books. But I didn't have enough, rubber hitting the road. I hadn't lived enough, experienced enough, or even learned enough professionally. So by the time Mastering of Your Life came, it was actually, to be honest, I was no longer proud of the old book. So if someone asked me, "Hey, Malti, I want to read your book," I was like, "Oh no, don't read that one," because it was like so long ago, and I felt I had grown up since. So I felt like I needed something new that I could feel proud of, or that I could feel was me now versus me then.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, I think that that sums it up quite nicely because, of course, human evolution, we're not the same person we were 10 years back, 15 years back, so we're different today. So a continuous progression, continuous evolution, and hence the reason why you've written this book. So I think that's great. So truth be told, I haven't read your very first book, Don't Think of a Blue Ball, but I am very curious to read that as a prequel to Mastering Your Life and the Mind Spa. Well, at least let me just say one thing that with regards to the Mind Spa, which was the very first book that I picked up, I was so hooked by the catchy title itself. So I was like, wow, this looks like something really fascinating, and I really want to look at it and read it. But yeah, if I were to compare it with Mastering Your Life, I would say that this book still stands on its own, and it is its own thing, and I respect it very much and everything that you've written here. And I also liked the new book as well. So coming to the title itself, Malti, Mastering Your Life. Let's drill down, deep dive into it a little bit. What is your understanding of mastery, or how do you define what is mastery? So if you could just tell us about that. Yeah.
So the paradigm shift that I think is the core of the work that we do in transformation is to support others and ourselves in being able to operate from above the line behavior. So for me, the biggest shift is to move from victim mindset, and the opposite of victim. I mean, we can use many words. I guess the opposite of victim, I don't know. What would you say? What is the opposite of victim to you, Omar?
Well, per perpetrator perhaps, but I think that in this case, it would probably be mastery. Having ownership of what of your life and not seeing yourself in that negative space, and instead saying that, okay, this is how I'm going to lead my life, and this is how I will take ownership of everything that happens to me, and not define myself as somebody to whom things are happening. And if I may say so, I think you, in the book at least, you've articulated it really well, where you said that one of the reasons you entitled it Mastery, for our viewers and listeners who haven't read the book yet, is because you wanted to give the opposite of victimhood, which is taking control and taking mastery over one's life. But if you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on how the writing process came about, just for my knowledge, how long did it take to actually write the entire book?
Um, Interesting thing for me is most of my books have actually been byproducts of other projects, and this comes back to Mastering Your Life. So maybe I'll come back to victim and mastery. So to me, my first kind of exploration of self-discovery was right after my personal challenges when I was very young. So, and I call them challenges because I felt like a victim. I felt like life was happening to me. Things were happening to me versus I am at the cause of life. So
Right.
being at cause versus being at what's the word? Reacting to life
Yeah, I
versus
think.
creating
Right.
life.
Yeah. Mm.
So when I embarked on Don't Think of a Blue Ball, I had actually been approached. I was living in Sydney, and someone approached me to create a 13 episode reality TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was quite an interesting idea. I was fascinated by it, and I started to write the episodes for this TV show. For some reason, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I ended up in India, and I somehow met, through a previous relationship, I met the publishers.
Right.
Publishers were like, hey, what you're doing sounds really interesting. Do you have something we can read? And I had these episodes that I had written for this TV show, and I shared it with them, and they're like, you know what, this is a book. And so that became Don't Think of the Blue Ball. Now we fast forward and come the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically sitting around in this home office. This used to be a bedroom, but now it's a home office. And again, I was approached by a company that said, Malti, we like what you're doing. Would you like to create a series of online learning, something like masterclass and stuff? I was like, great. So I started creating a whole series of videos. It didn't happen. Somehow we lost traction. It didn't happen. And then I realized that, oh goodness, this is a book. So again, the series of videos became a book. So to the short answer is it took about a year, because it went from the videos to then turning the videos into a manuscript and then editing it, making it into a book, and then finding professional editors to edit the book. And you know what happened was we edited it, and then we created a first version called Mastering Your Life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I felt it was too wordy.
Okay.
And something in me said, I want a snappy book that people can read in a day. I just want essence, and I don't want it to be, as you can already tell, I love to tell stories. Okay. And I think telling stories is great when, when you're face to face. When I'm in a workshop with people for 2 days, we can share stories. But to expect people to, anyway, I decided let's abridge the book. So I got it edited again, and hence the version that we have right now is abridged. It's like a 1 day sit down, one flight, go through it, and yeah. But so the editing took a long time, and I was like quarantining in some hotels, because when I went to Australia, we had 2 weeks quarantine. So I was doing that whilst getting it edited professionally. It's a tough process because you're getting someone else to cull and cut your words. And my mandate was, can you shorten it, make it catchy, and keep the stories, keep the essence, and get rid of all the fluff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I definitely did pick up the abridged version. So I found it to be a breezy read. Yes, and you're right that it is something that you can finish in one sitting theoretically, or in a couple of days at most. So yeah. So Malti, one of the things I really enjoyed about all your books, I mean the two that I've read, is that the content is very intertwined with your life itself, right? And because you're writing from empirical evidence. Um, uh, at one point in the book, you mentioned that at the age of 26, when you were at your lowest ebb, you were constantly, seeking validation, external validation, because as you said in your own words, that you were suffering from obesity, and you were, almost penniless, and you had a 6-year-old daughter to take care of. So in that kind of mindset, we always look for support and maybe some sort of external validation. So what is your take on that? Is that something, external validation, I mean, is that something that we should all be relying on, or is it something that we should not even look at, and we should kind of try to stand on our own feet and try to make the best do on our own? What would be your take on that with regards to external validation in particular? Yeah.
So human beings, as you know, we have needs and we have motivations.
Right.
And when we have a perception that some of our needs may not be met,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's not even real. It's just a perception, a belief, an assumption that I might not get my needs met. We feel insecure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Safety, the opposite of safe is insecure.
Yeah.
I think the core basic human needs are the need to survive, obviously, right? We need to stay alive. And in modern days, staying alive is that I have enough. So do I have enough resources to survive in this world? Parents go around teaching their children to, yes, educate yourself, pursue your passion, but be sure that you also find a way to get a job and live in this society, right? So, survival is a need. The second one that I think about is belonging and love. So to be seen, to be accepted, to be accepted and seen for who I am, to be loved. And that one, I think, comes about when we're children and we seek it from our parents and our caregivers. And then later on in life, as we are teenagers and young adults, we're seeking it from, romantically, or we're seeking it from communities. We're seeking it from social media, right? We go onto Instagram, we want people to like us because we want to be seen. And that's a basic human need of being seen. And then the next one is the basic human need of self-esteem, that I am good enough. So where I'm getting at is, if we have a perception that some of these basic needs may not be met, we feel scared, we feel insecure. I think that this whole validation thing is around esteem, where I feel like I need other people to recognize me and see my value and see that I'm a valuable contribution to the planet, to the world. And if I seek that, and if I always seek that, it's going to continue to be a vicious cycle where it's never, ever going to be enough. So I think there are two answers to that. One is, it is natural, it's part of human evolution to have that need. We need it from our parents when we're young, and then we start needing it from society as we get older. But there comes a point, and this is victim to mastery, where you realize that, you know what, it's never, ever going to be enough. I'm never going to be able to get enough validation from the world. It will be the next promotion, the next degree, the next PhD, the next, I don't know, car, the next whatever, right, that I seek. It's never, ever going to be enough. So if I ever want to feel enough, then I need to be able to find it within. And so what I feel is, it's a natural evolution. We hopefully get out of it. And for me, that is that step towards mastery, towards ownership, that I am going to make myself enough myself.
Right.
Does it answer your question? And also, it's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you've put it quite succinctly, because I think one of the flaws in looking for external validation is that it's kind of like a rat race. There's always that next promotion, the next car, the next group of friends, or whatever, and it's kind of never ending. So I think that it also ties into what you've mentioned a lot of times in all of your books, with regards to gratitude, right? To be thankful for what you have at this point in time, and to be happy about it. But then at the same time, you can always aspire to go to the next level. But at the same time, if you can't enjoy what you have right now, you will always be in that perpetual rat race, I suppose you could say. So Malti, coming back to your own journey, I want to touch upon one point which I found really interesting in the book. When you wanted to go back to Singapore, and you were once again, you weren't in the best of positions financially. You came up with a way to get back to Singapore, and then you did something once you got there. So please tell us more about that particular story of how you went back to Singapore, and what was the first thing you did once you got there.
So funny, because I know and you're asking me the question because you just want me to say it here on video. Okay, so I want to backtrack a bit and I'll answer this. So again, for me, mastery is the ability to do what you can with what you've got from where you are. Okay, do what you can with what you've got from where you are. So there's always a starting point. You've got to be able to do what you can, instead of hoping, waiting for something else, when this happens, or I don't have that and I can't do this and I can't do that. So on a whim, I think it was my gut, and I think we're going to talk about meditation later, but I believe that because I've been practicing mindfulness and meditation for the last 12 years, my intuition has become stronger, and I trust my gut and my instincts more. So sometimes logic hasn't caught up yet, but intuition and instinct said, go back to Singapore. Okay, so I had this internal feeling. There was no logic around it, and I knew that I wanted to go back. Now, going back to Singapore at that point, and you so rightly said, I didn't have the resources to do so. At least I perceived that I didn't have the resources to do so. I called up a friend. I called up friends and family in Singapore, and they were like, "Oh, Malti, do you have a job lined up?" I'm like, "No, I mean, I have some informal contracts with some consultancy firms. I'm going to do some work, but nothing's lined up." Oh, okay. So did you ever buy a property in Singapore? And you're going to come? No, I never did any of that either, right? So anyway, I realized it was going to be tough. I had a conversation with one of my first mentors and coaches, and he actually recently passed away. His name is Mark Hempstead. I think he he was one of the first people who ever influenced me in being able to move to mastery. And it was one of the first courses, life courses I did. And it was called Asia Works. In India and other parts of the world, it's similar trainings called Landmark Forum. Don't know if you're familiar with it, but that was my first foray. I was only like 24 or 25. Anyway, I called him up and he just reminded me, and he's like, Malti, you're Indian, right? I'm like, yeah, what does that have to do with anything? He's like, you were married before. I'm like, yeah, okay, but what does that have to do with anything? It's like, I know that you Indians always have a lot of jewelry exchange when you marry. So I'm like, yeah. He's like, so where is that jewelry? Like, in a safe. He's like, and where is that safe? Like, in a bank. Where's that bank? And then I was like, okay, the penny's starting to drop because the bank and the safe were in Singapore.
Right.
So basically, what I did was a girlfriend, one of my dearest girlfriends, for anonymity and privacy, I won't say her name, but anyway, she actually lent me the money to pay for my ticket, one-way ticket. And I came back to Singapore and I rented a room. Actually, I didn't have the money to rent a room, but anyway, I went to the safe and I found that I had quite a bit of jewelry. Thankfully, I was quite blessed. And I took the jewelry to a pawn shop, and I didn't do it all at once, but I just pawned away what I needed for the next 2 or 3 months at a time. I'm sounding a bit, I think it's, as I say this, I know that many people maybe, it's like I perceive that I didn't have money, but actually I did, right? It's just that my money was in the shape of gold. And I had forgotten it because of this old belief that you have to forget about this stuff. You save it for a rainy day, or especially if you have a daughter, then you save it because then you need to pass it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And I think that the point that we're trying to get to here is that in Indian tradition, and it's the same with Bangladeshi tradition as well, South Asian tradition in general, that when you have jewelry, you sort of assume that this will always be passed down to the next generation, or you store it away for a rainy day. But then when it comes to emergency situations like what you were facing, obviously life takes precedence in the present moment, and so that was your emergency funds to use to kind of propel yourself forward and take it one step at a time. So I think that for any young people who are watching, especially women who are in difficult relationships or who find themselves, in the middle of a divorce, that jewelry, it does belong to the girl, and it is for them to make do with as they see fit. So I think that there's a really the good life lesson here, and I was quite pleased to read that you were able to make use of it, and your coach was the one who actually pointed it out to you, and so that's when the penny dropped, like you said. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, sorry, you were.
but precautionary, right? I don't want to be an advocate. I'm not saying, hey, go and sell your jewelry. I think for me, yeah, and what, to buy a handbag or to take a flight to do, don't do that, right? Please, disclaimer, I'm not saying to do that, but I guess for me it was my career needed a new level, and I had enough courage and confidence that I was going to be able to not only make it back, but exponentially make it back. And that was the courage I had in myself, which took some time to develop. And so and I'm grateful that I had not done it when I was younger, because then I wouldn't have had. So, rainy day doesn't mean the next thing that you want to buy, or to take you out of a bind, or to pay a debt. You be strategic, be mindful, be smart about it. And I was lucky, I think, also because, true enough, I was cautious. I was very scared because I had literally had nothing. So I was very mindful about how I even spent it. And it was like for bare essentials, like renting the room and just getting things done and ensuring that I was trying to pave the way to be able to not just make it up, but make it up exponentially. And knock on wood, not to boast, but I've been able to, I was able to unpawn a lot of it because I had made enough money to do that. And then I've been able to go and buy things that I like, right? And wear jewelry that I enjoy wearing versus having old pieces of traditional gold sitting in a safe waiting for I don't know what.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the change in mindset, which got you to do that in the first place, is very commendable. And of course, we will have the disclaimer that Malti Bhojwani is not advocating that everybody should go sell their jewelry and whatnot. Nothing like that, but that's fine. So, Malti, one of the things I liked about this book, and as well as the Mind Spa, is your use of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And as a business graduate, I really I love reading about Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a student. But for our viewers and listeners who may not be as familiar with Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, do please tell us a little bit about it and how it ties to the mastery journey. Yeah.
I think I touched on it already where we talk about needs. So if you go back to Maslow, there are many versions of it, and I know you probably know even more about Maslow than I do. But let's simplify it. If you have a pyramid, and in fact, a lot of research has says that Maslow's intention was not for it to be a pyramid, but he was just talking about evolution and motivations. And you would look at it as survival is at the bottom, and he split it into physiology and safety, I think, right?
Yeah, physiological needs and safety needs, right? And
But let's bunch that up and just call it survival. The second one is love and belonging. The third one is self-esteem. And then in Maslow's words, next comes self-actualization.
Right.
Now, what I've noticed in my own life and in all the lives of the people that I coach, when I'm coaching more senior people around my age, people who are like, in leadership roles in large organizations who've, already kind of evolved through the needs, they are at this stage or phase in their life where they are looking for meaning, purpose, growth, making a difference, collaboration, service. They're looking at strategy long term.
Yeah.
Whereas when people are younger, we're looking at survival, belonging, self-esteem. So Maslow talks about these levels. And for me, the lower levels, the foundational levels are basic needs. And then the evolutionary levels are growth needs. So because they're basic needs, what I shared earlier, if we have a perception that they're not going to be met, we experience fear.
Right.
Fear equals victim mindset, right? If you are afraid, you fear that something's going to happen to you, you are the victim, right? But as you start to evolve and you find courage, so courage is at the cusp, and you take ownership, and you start to realize that some of your fears are actually dumbfounded. They are perceptions, they are not real.
Right.
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Maybe
I think we're trying to find out how Maslow's hierarchy of needs ties in with mastery. And so I think that once some of your needs are met, that fear automatically goes away. I think that's what you're alluding to. But at the same time, I think the question what I was probably trying to ask is, if suppose some of your needs are not met at the lower end, I mean the physiological safety, is it actually possible to kind of sidestep some of them and then go towards self-actualization directly, or do you feel that no, the lower level needs need to be met first before you can actually think about the higher level needs? Because at the end of the day, there's also the question of privilege, right? Some of us, who come from middle class families and or upper middle class, we have more time, to put it very bluntly, to think about self actualization. But somebody who may come from a different stratum of society, who's just trying to, like you said in the book, survive every single day, do they even have the time to think about those upper level needs? And mastery seems like a very distant pipe dream. So that's basically what I wanted to get your thoughts on.
And thanks for bringing up the point of privilege. I think, and that's why there's responsibility and ownership. So my take is those of us who have the luxury to pick up self-help books or search coaching or watch a podcast, we have more responsibility as well.
Right.
So I think mastery also comes with fulfilling our growth needs, which is coming back to Maslow. So if you have people who already have a lot more than others, then so I think a human being is born with a yearning to self-actualize, with a yearning to develop, a yearning to give back, to make a difference, to be of service, to be in contribution. However, we get held back because we perceive that we've got our own basic needs to take care of. I say perceive because we're now talking about middle class, upper middle class. If we were born if we weren't privileged, then surely I honestly don't have I don't know what to say there. And I just can only feel compassion and responsibility. Okay, so let's talk about those of us who can. And those of us who can, many of us are still stuck in a perception that we still need to get these basic needs met. Because in fact, they already are.
Right.
Because you have a roof over your head, you have food today, and you are surrounded by love, and you can help yourself feel like a good enough human being. But if we're going to stay in a victim mindset, that means that even though you have all this good around you, instead of being grateful and doing what you can with what you've got, you're still keeping yourself trapped in a perception of not enoughness. Right? So there is, of course, there's the reality of not enough. And I'm not talking about that. I don't have I don't know. Okay. And I feel sad, but compassion. But then there is the reality of I have enough, but I don't think I have enough. And that's who I'm speaking to, because that's who I used to be. I had a lot and enough, but I thought I had nothing. Absolutely. And so I was sitting in the victim chair, thinking life is supposed to happen to me, windfall is supposed to come on me, instead of getting on with it and trying to see what I could do with what I've got.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for that, Malti, because I think that the question of privilege is also something that it did come up a couple of times while reading the book, but I think that you've answered it quite well, that it is for this one particular stratum. But coming back to the book itself, Malti, I will say that the practice of meditation is something that you've really credited a whole lot with helping you on your journey towards mastery. So I confess that I'm not somebody who does meditation. I do a very distinct form of meditation in the Islamic tradition, which is called zikr. And we will come back to this because I would like to tie it in with mantra and see how it all adds up together. But would you mind telling us a little bit about meditation in general and how it has helped you in particular on your journey towards mastery?
How much time have you got?
Oh, we've got enough time. No problem. Yeah.
So this is something that I am very, very passionate about. I think this is what truly transformed my life. And I am very privileged to be able to teach it these days. And I think I feel very blessed. I feel like I'm very rewarded. And every time I teach it, I don't know if this resonates with you, but every time I get to teach it, I feel exponentially again rewarded. It's like life just gives me gifts. And so I'm very passionate about it. And I have a teacher. Her name is Geeta Bellin. She's in her 80s. She lives in Australia. And she taught me a form of mindfulness and meditation called the dynamic mind practice. What I loved about it is that she taught it in a way that I can teach it. So she taught me to teach it in a way that can remove, religion and teach it in a scientific way, so that it's just people feel more open and they feel that they're not excluded from it, right? You don't have to belong to a particular, belief system to be able to practice it. And it goes back to basically just brain science and understanding brain frequencies and realizing that as a human being, we go through a day and we have different states of consciousness in our lives. We go from busy beta, which is where we are right now, you and me. We are thinking logically, we are multitasking a little bit, and that's when our brainwaves are functioning really, really fast, and we are functional and logically thinking and going around our lives. Then as we start to focus on one thing, we fall into alpha brainwaves, and alpha brainwaves are, when have you ever experienced, doing something where time seems to, just fly because you're so engrossed? Has that happened to you, Omar?
All the time, especially when I'm reading, because if I want time to go faster, I just pick up a book, and then within minutes I feel as though, oh, wow, 60 minutes have already passed by. So that's kind of my life hack of trying to get time to go faster. But I can't seem to recall if I have something to make time go slowly. Maybe I just watch the clock and I keep thinking, oh,
that would do it. Yeah.
maybe that would help, right? Yeah. Yes.
So maybe another question for you is, what are you doing in your day or in your home when you suddenly have these moments of creativity, insights, when the pieces come together?
Right. Again, I spend so I'm an avid reader, and as a lot of our viewers and listeners will know, I moonlight as a podcaster and YouTuber, but in my day job, I'm a full-time sales director. And in between my sales calls, when I'm traveling from one client to another, or traveling out of Dhaka to outside Dhaka to meet a client, I'm constantly reading. So it's either I've got my physical books, or I use Google Play Store to read my ebooks. So in those moments, whenever I have inspirations or creativity or something that new that comes to my mind, if I happen to be reading a physical book, I'll highlight everything like crazy and write notes on the margins. And if I'm reading an ebook, I will try and highlight it with different colors. So at least with Google Play Store, I know that it uses red, blue, green, yellow, different colors to symbolize different things. And for anybody who's curious, with regards to mastering your life, every single information that I felt was new to me, I highlighted in yellow, and every single piece of information which I already had a lot of agreement with, at least 99% or even close to 100%, I would highlight it in green. So that's kind of how, as I like to tell all my friends as well as my colleagues, we education is finite, but learning is something that is lifelong. You never stop learning, but your education can stop with school or with university or postgraduate or a PhD. But learning is a lifelong commitment, and that's why I absolutely love traveling with all my books. So that depending on what kind of mood I'm in, I'll either read a self-help book or a book on cricket or on history. So that's how I would look at it. So does that answer the question?
I learned a lot from what you just said, and I think I want to tie that in with how we listen. So, when we are in conversations, and this is what happens a lot when I run and facilitate workshops with very senior people, right? Very, very, very intelligent, strategic senior people, right? Sometimes you notice that the issues that they have is that they're just not listening
Yeah.
to each other, because they're actually listening with that filter you mentioned. So they're listening for what they already agree with. So as they're listening, they're nodding, right? Because they agree.
Yeah.
Or they're listening with what they can debate with.
Debate with, yeah.
Actually thinking, how can I rebut? How can I disagree with this? Let me just wait for him to finish so that I can tell him what I think instead, or her. So that I just remembered that. But where I wanted to go with is, I understand that you read and you get these creative insights and ideas and you highlight them. When you're not reading, going through your day, your average day, books aside, where are you location wise, or what are you doing activity wise when you have these sparks of intuition and creativity and insights?
Right. So, truth be told, I think that my wife is the more creative one in our family, and as you can see, the props that I have, those are actually her props, and so, it's not that, and so I think that she's probably the one with all the creative genes. But with regards to my daily life, it's very for myself at least I consider it quite mundane in the sense that it's my home life, my office, and in between I have my books, and that's about it. And so we do like socializing a lot with our friends as well, but at the end of the day, we feel a lot more comfortable with our books than we do with people because a lot of conversations can be very superfluous, I feel. And so you kind of gravitate towards your own tribe and people with common interests. And hence one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking to all of my authors online, on Zoom, because it is something that I can relate to, and hopefully my authors can also appreciate, that I appreciate their work and what they're bringing to the table. But yeah, in terms of creativity, because I work in sales, there's really not a whole lot of opportunity to be creative with the kind of work I do, or even to think too much about things that are outside my sphere of influence, which is how to get the next client, how to close this particular deal. I can be creative with regards to the different kinds of sales strategies that we're coming up with, but that probably is the extent of my creativity. So I hope that.
Okay. So I think I was loading my question because I have a particular kind of answer, right? So basically, if we think about meditation and mindfulness, our brain frequencies, we go from beta to alpha as it slows down, and you resonated with alpha, which is when time flies. And then the next one is called theta.
Okay.
And theta is where we actually are able to access creativity and memory.
Right.
It happens with many people, maybe now it might resonate, but it happens with many people when they're doing something monotonous, like maybe running or walking.
Hmm.
It can happen in the shower. That's actually the most common location,
Right.
that whole bathroom shower location. It can also happen when we're just about to wake up, or sometimes in the middle of the night when we're just about to fall asleep. That's because physiologically the brain has slowed down
Mm.
to this frequency, which allows creativity and memory to happen. So
Right.
when you have pockets of creativity and memory, my suspicion is that you have fallen into theta brainwaves.
Yeah. Theta brainwaves. Wow.
And
That's
then,
Oh wow, yeah, that's amazing, and yeah, I think that and just to add to that point, whenever I'm by myself, maybe suppose I'm at my office desk and I'm pondering creative ways to talk to the next client or devise new strategies. I think that Cal Newport wrote a book called Deep Work, which alludes to a lot to what you just said about the tapping into that theta level of creativity. So yeah, but thank you so much for sharing that, Malti. I think that I've also learned quite a bit about creativity and the theta levels. But just staying with meditation, there is one other point that I wanted to touch on, and that is something that you also talk about a lot in the book, which is called micro meditation, aka centering. So would you please tell us a little bit about micro meditation slash centering and how that works? Yeah.
the best way for me to do this is to actually just finish the line of thought. So
Yeah.
we have four, the ones I talk about or know about are four different brain frequencies:
Mhm.
beta, alpha, theta, delta. Right? As when we meditate, we allow ourselves to deliberately sink
Mhm.
to lower frequencies. As we go about our day, we are operating mainly at beta and alpha.
Mhm.
When we sit in regular meditation, we're offering our minds to slow down.
Mhm.
When we can access all these different states of consciousness and brain frequencies deliberately, we give ourselves more opportunity to develop a dynamic mind. So, a mind that can think logically, be focused, be creative, and also connect with intuition.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, when we meditate regularly, we make these states of consciousness more accessible
Yeah.
because we have a regular practice. It's almost like driving and
Yeah.
being able to go to neutral gear. Now, micro meditations to me is a way to come to neutral or to center quickly and easily when we need it.
Mhm.
So I could be talking to you right now, and maybe I'm something you say or something I say brings me off center. I get either distracted or maybe triggered, and I'm off center. What I can do is take a deep breath and bring myself back here.
Mhm.
So in the form of coaching that I'm trained in, it's called ontological coaching. So we talk about being able to shift our own mindset and shift the way we see the world,
Mhm.
shift our perception by being able to find our own center. And you can do that through three access points. The access is body, emotion, and language.
Mhm.
So find my body center, and it can be anywhere for anyone. But I mean, if you think about it logically, for me, it's like, okay, halfway between front and back, halfway between left and right, halfway between the top of my head and the soles of my feet. So the way that I would facilitate a centering is get someone to close their eyes, focus on their breath, find their body center,
Mhm.
and
Absolutely.
then find the center of emotion.
Right.
And the center of emotion is acceptance. So this is where I accept how I feel. I don't judge it. I don't question it. I'm just okay with it. This is how I feel. Acceptance. And then the center of language is silence. And so I believe that if you close our eyes and you listen to the silence, you'll always find silence beneath the sounds.
Mhm.
So if I can quickly find that center, it means I can quickly bring my gear to neutral. And now I can be at choice, again, mastery
Mhm.
instead of victim,
Yeah.
at choice of how I want to feel and what energy I want to bring, what intention I want to bring into the next conversation, the next meeting, the next interaction.
Mhm.
So micro meditations is a way to center very quickly so that whenever I need to, I can find that center. So you do it deliberately, frequently, so that when you need it, you can find it easily.
Yeah.
Does that
Absolutely.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that that would really be helpful for me in my daily life if I ever run into a client that that is that is maybe being disrespectful or rude. That is the kind of situation where everybody of us, all of us who work in sales, struggles a little bit with every time. But that in that moment, centering and micro meditation, those are the situations where it really helps, because you can get back on track and have a fruitful conversation. So one more thing, Malti, that I'd like to tie in with meditation is with, again, coming back to the book itself. Right at the beginning of the book, you mentioned a time when your mother was ill, and that was when you were with her in the hospital, you were chanting your mantras. And so, how does, just from my knowledge, because I honestly am not very sure about it, how does meditation and mantra tie in with each other? Are they similar to each other? Are they very distinct? If you could just help us with that. Yeah.
So, from my understanding, and this is very personal,
Yeah.
meditation is the commitment, the willingness to sit down for X amount of time. Okay, let's not even time bound it. Let's say you are committed to sitting down for 10 minutes by yourself with yourself.
Mhm.
Now, when you meditate, for me, it helps to have an anchor so that you can give because the mind wants to wander, it wants to go everywhere. They
Mhm.
call it the monkey mind or whatever, right? The mind is, it cannot, energy cannot be released without ideas and thoughts. Okay, so we're always having thoughts. It's very hard to be thoughtless or
Mhm.
mindless. Okay, so we always have thoughts. Having a focal point, which can be anything. Some people use breath, some people use a flame, some people use a mantra.
Mhm.
It
Right. Yeah.
it just gives you somewhere to come back to,
Right.
and then your mind wanders and you have thought, and then you realize, oh, I was going to sit here and meditate. You come back to that focal point.
Right.
So to me, I mean, I don't, I'm not the expert on mantras. I find it helpful because I have one, because I learned transcendental meditation 20 years ago. And then
Mhm.
I learned other form of meditation where I was given a mantra. And
Mhm.
to me, the mantra does not have any meaning or anything. It just gives me a place to go.
Mhm.
And when I teach meditation, especially if I teach it to a large audience, then I would just ask them to focus on their breath. I
Mhm.
hope that helps to answer your question. So
Yeah.
basically, I think that meditation is not being thoughtless. Meditation is the pendulum between thought and some kind of light, no control, easy focus.
Mhm.
If you have a mantra, you
Yeah.
go from thought to mantra. If not, you go from thought to breath, back to thought, back to breath. And the whole pendulum is meditation.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really interesting, because what I'll do is I'll try and digress a little bit and try and connect the dots between meditation and what my understanding of mantra is, as well as the Islamic practice of zikr. And so firstly, let me just talk a little bit about zikr, because that's my forte. I understand what this is, and I was just curious about whether zikr and mantra are basically exactly the same thing, which has to do with chanting or meditating on the names of the divine. So for our viewers and listeners who may not know, and for you as well, Malti, like in the Islamic tradition, what happens is that zikr is basically very akin to mantra, in the sense that you take one of the divine names and you repeat it to yourself over and over again, and then that particular name that you're chanting becomes manifested. Okay, and this also ties in with a lot of the previous books that you've also alluded to, like Napoleon Hill, and the way that he used to manifest things. Oprah Winfrey, Rhonda Byrne, the author of The Secret. They all seem to have stumbled upon something where they try and manifest or create the universe that is around them. And in my opinion, I think that they're basically, these are two different traditions, but they're all talking about the same thing, which is you figure out a way to manifest or create the universe that is around us. And the zikr, at least in my empirical, life, or in my experience, this really helps a lot to manifest the kind of life or situation that I want to be in. And so I just kind of thought that tying it with this would be a really interesting way of looking at it. But what is your take on manifestation? And you've talked about it a lot. You've talked about Oprah. You've talked about Napoleon Hill, around a bar, and you've talked about a lot of them in the book. So how do you go about with manifesting things in your daily life?
So I believe that the fertile ground, and please do not, to the listeners, we don't
Yeah.
misuse, right? It has to be high intended, positive, helpful, and serve the larger good.
Mhm.
As in, whatever you manifest or want to manifest has to fit in with the order of goodness and kindness and win-win,
Yeah.
right? It can never be a manifestation for me at the expense of someone else. And if we believe we live in an abundant world, a loving world, a compassionate world, then what's good for me is also good for you.
Mhm.
And so that's the caveat in a way. Okay.
Right. Right.
Having said that, I think the fertile soil or ground for our manifestations or our desires or our yearnings to come true is in that lower frequency of the mind.
Mhm.
That is in the thetas and the deltas of the mind. So when we meditate, and I think I don't know it, but what I understand from what I'm hearing is that the mantra that you use or the zikr that you use is already helping your mind to slow down and
Mhm.
come down from beta to alpha to theta to delta, just to give it names, right? And
Right.
as it sinks and you start to plant, and those might be affirmations or prayers, and in other words, affirmations, prayers, they are simply positive thoughts,
Mhm.
the opposite of worry, the opposite of negative thoughts. So
Right.
if you plant the good stuff, the good seeds in that fertile ground,
Yeah.
it is going to manifest. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that's my belief. So as you practice meditation frequently,
Mhm.
so I think the next level is where you reach a level where your very thoughts and your mindset is already positive, win-win, good, kind for you and for others. I'm not talking about altruism either, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't even have to be deliberate. Every time you meditate, these good, positive, healthy, loving thoughts come, and then you see it manifest in your life. Life becomes healthy, good, loving, positive, abundant.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
to me, that's the relationship. I
Yeah.
hope, yeah.
For sure, for sure. And thank you so much, Malti, for explaining that, because I think that the links between all these different traditions and how it all ties together, maybe that could be the title of your next book, the holistic picture. But yeah, thank you so much for that. I've really learned a lot. So, Malti, we're pretty much coming to the towards the end of our hour here. But before we let you go, there are a couple of staple questions that we have here at Book Cafe Podcast, because we are at the end of the day a podcast about books because it's in the title. So the question that I have for you, if you could pick a book that you feel that every young person should read at least once in their lifetime, what book would you recommend that everybody should read at least once?
Hmm. At least once. The Comfort Book by Matt Haig. I
Okay.
found that very, very powerful, very beautiful,
Mhm.
and I resonated a lot. So I was listening. I love to listen to audiobooks because that's the way I get exercise and book at the same time. So whenever I go for a long walk, I use Audible. Um, the Comfort Book, I resonated with almost everything he said.
Right.
So that's one of my favorites. There's another one that I love, and it's actually an advancement of, it's called, I'm looking it up because I forgot the name. It's Transcend by Scott Berry. And
Right.
that is a book that takes Maslow's hierarchy of needs and totally extrapolates it and makes it so powerful. Love it. There's certain versions, modern versions of A Course in Miracles that I really appreciated,
Mhm.
uh, because Course in Miracles initially was a bit religious, but then there are versions, much more modern versions of it that again brings the religions together and connects with A Course in Miracles, how we make miracles happen.
Right.
Um, uh, Letting Go by David Hawkins,
Hmm.
Anything by Mike Dooley.
Right.
I've had, yeah, I mean, sometimes I think you cannot be an author unless you're a big reader yourself.
Right, right. I'm not an author myself. I dabbled in poetry back in university, but yeah, I completely agree with you that everybody I've spoken to so far have also said the exact same thing. You can't be an author without being a reader, first and foremost. So yeah, thank you so much for that. So, Malti, just another question. Would you say that you're more of a nonfiction person, or do you enjoy fiction equally as well as
I
non?
used to love fiction, used to love fiction, and now I think I'm just spoiled by Netflix. So now I also I just love movies and picturization. So now I don't know if it's I hope book lovers don't knock me for it. So now I kind of fulfill my need for fiction and stories through film and movies and TV shows.
Right.
And hence when I read, it's mainly nonfiction, and I read stuff that help me advance my own knowledge, fill in the
Great.
gaps that I'm missing so that I can help my clients better and find
Absolutely.
new language to explain concepts in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's completely fair because usually what I understand is that we might pick up a book in order to develop a new skill or as a form of escapism, right? So for you, if you're watching Netflix and rather than reading fiction, so that for you is the escapism, and obviously the nonfiction books that you're reading is to help you with developing new skills and whatnot. So yeah, that I think that's perfectly fair. So Malti, and again, just before we let you go, please tell us if any of our viewers and listeners wanted to get in touch with you or to find out what future projects you have in the pipeline, what would be the best way to do so?
Malti Bhojwani. So the website is maltibhojwani.com to keep it simple. The Instagram is Malti Bhojwani. The Facebook is, I think, Malti Bhojwani, but I don't use that anymore. So I think Instagram and the website would be the best way. LinkedIn, I guess, in a professional way, LinkedIn
Yeah,
would be great.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And just staying with that point, do you have any new books that are in the pipeline that your fans and readers can expect to see very soon?
I I came out with a new edition of the journal. This is the gratitude journal
Okay.
because it kind of sold out the first edition, and it's not a book. It
Mm,
actually is a journal for people to write in gratitude. I
right.
met someone 2 days ago who showed me 2 years of writing, and it made me cry because I was so touched to see how diligent someone was, an aunt of mine, and she was just writing in it. So
Mm.
actually nothing in the pipeline. I'm thinking maybe, every decade. So maybe when I turn 60. So that's another eight years more.
Another 8 years. Well, that's awesome. Well, not a problem. So I think that yeah, we'll definitely wait with a bated breath for that particular book, and we do hope that the next 8 years is extremely fruitful for you, so that you have even more to share with us and that we can benefit from. So once again, before signing off, let me just tell our viewers and listeners that the book is called Mastering Your Life by Malti Bhojwani. Please go out and buy it. It's a fantastic book written by a fabulous author, and I can't recommend the book enough. So, Malti, thank you so much once again for your time. We really appreciated having you on the show and really hope to have you back for a future episode, maybe to talk about your other books, which you kind of don't want to talk about, but we'll try and entice you into talking about it just so we can get some more viewers and listeners to go out and get them.
Thank you, Omar. And I actually look forward to reading one of yours. I have a strong feeling that there's a book within you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, well, I would say that a lot of my friends, enticed me into setting up this podcast. I probably wouldn't have done it if they hadn't told me to keep doing it. And so they've been really supportive. So has my family, and a lot of them have also told me to write a book. So maybe, again, for our viewers and listeners who know me, I have a huge interest in history and anything attached to history. I'm able to probably write about. So maybe I'll try and take your advice and write about something to do with history. So let's see. But thank you once again, Malti. I wish you all the best to you and your family. And if you ever do come to Bangladesh, do let me know. We would love to have you because we have literature festivals that happen every year. And so I think that you do have a story to tell that a lot of young people can feel inspired by, especially young women. And so we that invitation is out there for you. So do let us know whenever you're in town.
Thank you, Omar.
All
Have a
right.
great
You too.
weekend. Take care.